Hello, my name is Andreas Docci, and today I'm going to be answering some data analytics questions, mainly about the processes and data privacy. So here goes. My first question is, what does the CRISP-DM methodology for data mining entail, and what does the analyst do in each step? So CRISP-DM, which stands for the Cross-Industry Standard Process for Data Mining, is a widely used methodology for data mining in the data and data analytics projects, consists of 6 main phases, each with its own specific tasks and objectives. The first one, and very, very important, is the business understanding. So the objective here is to understand the project objectives and requirements from a business perspective. So here an analyst's role will be to collaborate and work with stakeholders to define the project goals and success criteria for the analysis, identify any problems to be solved and the potential impact of the data mining project, and also develop a project plan that outlines the tasks, timelines, and resources needed to carry out this information. This is also where you create your hypothesis that you will be testing with your data analysis, which then takes you on to the second role, which is the data understanding. So as the name suggests, to try and understand your data. So you collect all the initial data and get familiar with it. And you try to identify data quality issues and insights. So like you'll gather data from databases and files and etc. You perform an EDA, so an exploratory data analysis, to understand the data structure, quality, and content. Document data characteristics include something like data types, distributions, and any anomalies or missing file you find. So you document all these because it makes the next step a lot easier rather than having to look for them after. So the next phase is the data preparation. So this is when after you've collected and done the calculations and distributions and data types of all your data, now you're preparing the data to create a final data set that will be ready for modeling, which may involve cleaning and transforming the data. So an analyst's role here would be to clean the data, like you'd handle the missing values, you'd remove any duplicates, any anomalies, and you correct those inconsistencies. And if you need to, you can transform the data, or by creating new categories and variables for the data to be more representative, to answer those questions that we discussed in the first phase of the business understanding. So what is my hypothesis? What am I trying to prove? And then you'd split the data into training, validation, test set to ensure that you have a robust model for evaluation. Then we go on to modeling. Modeling is when we select and apply various modeling techniques to the prepared data. So we need to choose appropriate modeling techniques based on the business problem that we're trying to answer. So is it a classification issue? Is it a regression issue? Is it a clustering issue? Then we build and train models using the training data set, tune model parameters and evaluate performance using validation data, and then document the modeling process and results, including any changes and challenges faced. After the model has been created, we evaluate it. So we move on to the evaluation, which is the 5th step. So we evaluate the model to ensure it meets business objectives and is ready for deployment. We assess the model's performance using appropriate metrics, the accuracy, precision, and then we compare the results against the success criteria defined in the business understanding phase. Does it prove our hypothesis correct? Then we communicate these findings to our stakeholders. We highlight the model's strengths and weaknesses, and we make recommendations for deployment or further refinement based on the evaluation results. And we finally move on to the final phase, the 6th and most beautiful phase, the deployment phase. So this is when we implement the model in a production environment and monitor its performance. We collaborate with IT and other teams that are necessary to deploy the model into a production system. We develop documentation and user guides for stakeholders who will use the model, and we monitor the model's performance over time and make adjustments as necessary. We also want to be gathering feedback from users and stakeholders to inform future iterations of the project. Question 2. Explain what needs to be done before you can forecast time series. In other words, what does a time series analysis involve? Well, when it comes to a time series analysis as a whole, you would handle it as any CRISP-DM, okay? And you would undergo each step as discussed prior. The main difference with a time series, you're trying to predict or forecast what may happen in the future using historical data. So here we need a decomposition of the time series. It's very, very important. Here we try to understand the trends, the seasonality, any cyclic patterns within the data, and then we want to do some stationary testing. So stationary time series has a constant mean and variance over time. So this helps us remove all the noise, all the outliers, all the things that could make your line graphs or your data just be scattered all over, and it'll be so hard for you to find a trend. So by making the data stationary, it's easier to decipher trends and patterns. Then, furthermore, most forecasting models, such as ARIMA, they use stationary time series for predicting and forecasting. So we're going to discuss the main principles of data ethics, It's question 3, as well as what companies or organizations could do to uphold these principles. So the first is privacy. So individuals should be in control of their own data. Organization must comply with data privacy laws and get the consent of an individual before they can collect and share that private information. Transparency is when individuals should have a clear overview of what the data that they are giving away is being used for, how it's collected, what it's shared with, and this goes also not just what happens with the data internally within the company that is collecting it, but also what happens externally. Do they pass it on to another company? Do they work hand in hand? Are other people getting access to the data where it could infringe on an individual's privacy? Then it's accountability. So organizations are responsible for the data they collect and share. They must safeguard it. So an individual's private information needs to be safeguarded by that company. And if anything does happen, a data breach, or it's the individual's data is being used with something that he or she or they did not condone in, then the company is accountable. And then we have equality. So organizations must not disadvantage or discriminate against individuals or groups when handling and processing data. So things like not making data sets of just specific ethnic background. So if let's say you're looking at crime, myself, I'm Italian, so it goes only Italians that are based there. So if we have 3 million of the population and we say that 1 million are going to be our data set and 800,000 of those are just Italians, then your data is not equal. Every single ethnic background or groups and diversity in our data set needs to be represented and understood equally. We can't just fit for one demographic. Question 4. Imagine you are an analyst at a financial services company and you have some concerns about bias in the way a predictive model was measured. How would you raise your concerns with your manager? Make some suggestions for how to avoid measurement bias in the future. So initially, I think two things that have to be done from your perspective immediately, or my own, would be, first of all, document the specific instances. Like, what evidence to collect the evidence. What data biases is there? Could it be? Are there any discrepancies? Are there any skewed results? So you are there like or is there any in prediction discrepancies in predictions across different demographic groups? And then highlight potential impacts on the decision making, the customer trust, and the regulatory compliance. Then with all this information, I would engage with my stakeholders. So I would schedule a meeting with my manager and relevant team members, such as data scientists, compliance officers, to discuss my concerns, present what I have found in the data, and see what is the best way to move forward. When it comes to the prevention, regularly reviewing data collection methods to identify and mitigate potential biases from the data collection process immediately. Ensure that the training data sets include a wide range of demographic groups to prevent overfitting to a specific population. Implement fairness constraints during model training to ensure equitable performance across different groups. And then on to our final question. Explain the differences between regression and classification models in predictive analysis. When would you use one of these models over the other? So, the purpose of a regression model is used to predict continuous numerical values. For example, if you were to be predicting a person's salary based on their years of experience or forecasting sales revenue for the next quarter, you would use a regression model. However, a classification model is used to predict categorical outcomes. This means our output will be binary, a yes or a no. So this means they assign data points to specific categories or classes. For example, is an email spam or not? Is a customer going to buy or not? So if it is binary and it deals with working with categories, so a group of different types of clientele, who is more likely to invest in what, who is more likely to buy blue clothing rather than yellow clothing, and so on. Thank you very much. My name was Andrea Stocci. Very kind.